dreamt up this idea a few months ago, and I was lucky enough to pitch it to Bosch to make a 7-foot tall DNA-shaped double helix marimba, and they said yes. So when I dreamt it up, I didn't really think it was going to get picked, and I'd have to figure out how to make this thing in the real world. So now I'm dealing with that. I had told Bosch that I would make a video sort of showing some of the process and the learning and the experimentation as part of the package, but I'm going to do more than that. I'm going to do a couple videos about it because I've just been shooting so much footage and learning so much. I thought I would share some of this journey for anyone who might be interested in watching along. I'm actually a lot further along in the project than these videos that I'm starting to release now, but you might find them interesting. It's funny going back and editing these because I'm like, oh yeah, geez, I knew so little then. And like, I know so much now. And in another week or so, I'll have another installment showing some more of the progress. Thanks for watching. Be good.
Before I started making the 7-foot tall version of the sculpture, I wanted to start understanding how a double helix was made. And I also wasn't sure how I was going to do it. My first thought was, of course, to buy some kind of pipe bender and sort of finagle it myself. My second thought was to cut out some type of spiral or circle out of a piece of sheet steel and then stretch it out, which is what I'm experimenting with here. That idea I think would have worked, but I really like the pipe dynamic better, and I got lucky that one of the few people in the world that dabbles in the black art of bending pipes has a shop in Connecticut, so I was able to eventually, as you'll find out later in the build, bend pipe. But so these are some of my just early small-scale experiments with how I was going to approach the twist, whether I was going to do it incorrectly like that or the proper way. And again, besides thinking about the helix shape and its finality, I was also thinking about how I could make it in 2D and stretch it to 3D. Since this is a Bosch sponsored video, of course I'm going to use some Bosch tools. They sent me this table saw to do most of the woodworking on, as well as some angle grinders, which will appear later. I actually owned this exact same table saw before. I had bought it, and then I gave it away when I got a permanent table saw. And I remember that the reason I bought it was that of all the table saws in this sort of price range, it seemed to be the most stable, the best fence and parts, and this one was the same as my last one. It went together great.
Most of the woodworking I need to do for this project is, making the wooden marimba keys. I'm going to do that, almost all of it, really, on a sled that I'm going to build for this right here. I found this piece of plywood cut off in my shop, which is, I couldn't ask for a better size. And then I have these scraps of plywood for making the fences on it, and some oak for the runners.
There are many more comprehensive videos about making sleds, and I don't think that my sled is necessarily the best or the worst, but I just kind of put this footage in just to show that I did it on the saw for the saw. This is the trick I picked up from David Picciuto's latest sled build. I'd suggest checking out the Make Something channel. He puts a slight angled cut into the backboard of his sled for the sawdust to go into so it doesn't mess up your stops and get in the way. So I did that, I screwed it to another piece for thickness, and then I just ran it over the jointer real quick to make sure that that was perfectly flush before screwing it to my board. And now you can see that little groove there. And then I went and I also made a bunch of marks all over the board after putting it together where all my inches are, so I can just use pencil lines instead of having to measure every time. This is a chunk of walnut that was cut down in my neighborhood about 4 or 5 years ago, and my neighbor pulled some pieces out for me. This is the primary source of wood I am using for the marimba keys that will represent North America. It's locally felled. It was a tree that had to go. It fits the MO perfectly. I have a decent amount of it. It's a great wood. I was really excited to use this. But since I have the most of this, I used it for my first attempts at making keys. I had to prep it all. It was fun. And there's something really cool about, taking it with the bark on it and then making it into a finished product. Very exciting. This is my first attempt at making marimba keys. Of course, I had to do it the hard way. This one little nut was just too high for me to get it through my bandsaw, so I had to take it off. There we go. $100 later, I'm back to the table saw. Now the goal of this is to make these keys entirely or as much as possible on just the Bosch table saw. So even though I do have a miter saw, I was just using my sled and trying to do all my cuts on this table saw, and I was able to. Then after having the basic rough size and shape cut out, I made way too many measurements, which I learned in the process, and went about and started cutting out that basic key shape. It's basically like cutting out an arch from the center of the key. I found a website online of a gentleman named LaFavre who has all these very specific measurements for the keys of a marimba that he has made that I'm using as a guide. Obviously sanding and shaping is going to change the pitch. I'm using multiple species of wood, and the density and qualities of the wood are going to affect the pitch. So I think the best thing is going to be for me to basically just go out and cut out a whole bunch of things in basic sizes and shapes that are here, start hitting them, seeing what they sound like, and then fitting them into the right pitch from there. Now I just built this very simple box with these elastics I can move back and forth for the different size keys, and I don't have a great microphone on this camera here, but I'm sure you can hear the difference. It's getting a little bit of a ring now. That one sounds like a real marimba, huh? Now instead of just matching the pitch to the guitar, my little tuner I have on my phone is actually hearing it. You can see it's actually an A sharp, and it's just a little high, which is good because I'll sand it in later. The other thing I've heard about this sort of contraption is you need to find the nodes on the key, which is where you want to drill to mount them later, and the trick is, I guess, to put some salt on it. We got a lot of, I might need some tighter rubber bands. And the salt will collect where the nodes are. You can see one happening right there. This one I'm having a little bit, I'm not seeing quite as clearly. Looks like it's right about there. So we got like there and there. Learning is cool. So. Let's try cutting this one. We'll cut a little bit off each end first and see what happens. I wanted to experiment with altering the pitch by cutting in different ways and directions to see what differences it would make. It's a little bit higher. It's an F now. I guess that solved its own problem. I thought that it would go up even higher when I did that, but it actually only went up a quarter of a step. Well, it seems pretty easy to tune these, right? But we can't just go and randomly cut these things to tune them. See, the smaller one is lower pitched than the bigger one. So we can't do that. We're going to have to take the material off from the inside instead to keep our lengths looking right. Otherwise it'll be all weird. Can't have higher pitched ones being bigger than the lower pitched ones. But it's time to go home today. So we'll deal with that tomorrow. Alright, that seems like a good place to stop now. If you follow me on Instagram, I'm posting a lot of stuff in my stories about this build. It can kind of catch you up to where I actually am in real time. And in another week or so, I'll put up another video of showing more of this process as I continue to go through the footage and assemble. I hope you're enjoying it, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Talk to you later. Be good.